This presentation is for informational purposes only and is not offered as legal or professional advice regarding any particular matter. No person should act on the basis of this presentation without seeking appropriate professional advice. The speaker's views expressed in this program may not be reflective of those of anyone else, including their respective firms or any of its lawyers, associates, or clients.
Welcome to Supercharged Supply Chain, a podcast that delves into the complex, complicated, and ever-changing world of getting product from a source to a destination with your hosts, Ron Liebman and Joseph Paris. Hello, and we would like to welcome you to another episode of Supercharged Supply Chain. Our goal is to share with you, our audience, the experiences and bring to your attention the latest advances in establishing and maintaining supply chains. We'll also help you to become aware of changes in rules and regulations as they become known and help you avoid uncomfortable situations and which might make influences your business decisions. So I'm Joseph Paris.
And I'm Ron Liebman.
And we would like to welcome you to this episode. Ron, what's the episode going to be about today?
The episode's going to be about personal protective equipment, PPE, so ubiquitous nowadays. You hear about it whenever a politician speaks or you pick up the press. Simply put, it's vinyl gloves and face masks and the materials you can wear to try to limit the possibility of getting COVID-19. Obviously, it has other uses, but that's become the key use right now. It's become an amazingly large worldwide business. And while there does not seem to be a shortage of production, there are a lot of challenges facing the people who are trying to go into the business today, both as brokers, shippers, purchasers of the products in terms of vetting, which I'll talk about a little later. But first, Joe will give you some tangible examples of things that he's worked on recently.
You know, it's kind of interesting. We didn't, I never really gave PPE a second thought, right? I mean, it was ubiquitous. There was never a clamor for it. There was no real need for anybody to concern themselves with it, except for those people in healthcare at the pointy end of the stick of those people, delivering services to patients. But I had a client in upstate New York. I guess I have a client in upstate New York. It's a hospital network. And I had an engagement, on-site engagement back there in late June, early July. And they were struggling mightily to obtain PPE. In fact, the person who was responsible for acquiring PPE for the entirety of the hospital network reminded me of Radar O'Reilly in MASH. She was on the phone, swinging deals and trying to, horse trade to get whatever she could put her hands on. It was that challenging, and her office was just filled with boxes upon boxes of this equipment that she was able to get her hands on. And she was expressing frustration that some of her orders would get bumped to a higher bidder, that the material that she was ordering wasn't actually in stock. I mean, it was a real challenge, and she was devoting an inordinate amount of time to locating and acquiring this material. And I really just never thought it could be such a challenge. And why do you think some of those challenges might have existed, Ron?
The supply chain network was not set up to deal with the huge bump up in the need for these products. When you look at a hospital, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of gloves in short periods of time, plus users we never thought of. I mean, I have a client who supplies gloves to a major sports league. Who would ever think that a major sports league would need vinyl gloves? I'm talking also in the hundreds of thousands. And so to be hit off the bat that way with such a large spike, quite frankly, industry couldn't take it. And even if you look at, let's look at KN95 masks, those were the hot things at first. The few manufacturers who made them, and the one in my mind, true manufacturer in the US, simply could not themselves distribute the masks. And that, again, as I'll talk about later, created this somewhat unsavory network of people who tried to. And those are the folks that I'm willing to bet were dealing with your person at the hospital.
Yeah, the challenge, it seemed, was that everybody started popping up a tent and selling PPE. I read a report in Europe that Germany was defrauded of hundreds of millions of dollars, signed a contract to a fictitious vendor, and it was only after the money was transferred that they discovered it, and then they had the arduous challenge of clawing back that money. I don't know how successful they were, but the chances are once the money is sent, it's hard to recover, especially for an outfit that is only but a shadow and not real.
That really is not an unusual scenario. If you look at a lot of these companies involved, they're less than a year old, and they all have these real medical sounding names. And there was a tremendous amount of fraud. As a matter of fact, I had never been involved with PPE per se. I had done a lot with last mile, both over-the-counter prescription medicine deliveries in the supermarket industry. But and suddenly a colleague of mine came to me with a trade issue, which basically was some guys got together and they said, we can do this. And they went searching for people to get supply of KN95 masks. They found a middleman on the internet with a great website. By the way, they all have great websites, with doctors. It's really pretty amazing. But they were fraud. And they sold to a state government, and they became embroiled in both an issue with the state looking to recoup its money, but also the federal government questioning the entire deal, and if it was price gouging and if it was money laundering. And so these nice guys who had good businesses of their own suddenly were embroiled in something way above their head.
Yeah.
And that is the case. I mean, subsequently, other groups of people, I mean people who are builders and financiers and small manufacturers have come to us and they've said, hey, help, how do we do this properly? Unfortunately, in one case, they were out $3 million before they did that. Unfortunately, we're helping them not only to recoup going forward by getting them good deals, but it seems easy. This is the 1848 gold rush in the US all over again. It's everyone thinking they're going to put their pan in the river and the gold nugget is going to come up and suddenly there'll be J.D. Rockefeller or whoever at the time was rich. And that's what this really is. So cutting through the wheat and the chaff, I mean, to some degree, doing this as a lawyer, the paperwork flow is rather unusual. It's not a typical purchase order with a time frame for delivery, whatever the Incoterm is. It has to do with inspections that cause a purchase order to be absolutely non-cancelable, even if the product gets there and is not good, followed by a string of different kinds of documents, none of which put much liability on the person in the middle doing the sale. So what we've done, since we represent sellers, we represent purchasers, we represent brokers, is we've tried to rationalize that within the normal trade context, of a purchase order with a timing date, with some way of recouping, most importantly, putting choice of law in the US, in New York. Certainly we'd put it in Paris or London, because I'd love to go there. But I think, people in trade know the three places in the world you want to venue is Paris, London, and New York because of the body of law. So we try to help. But even with that, every day we do due diligence. And I think the most important thing we do for them is we do due diligence on the people on all sides of the deal, even the clients who come to us. I believe we're uniquely situated, and this is not supposed to be an advertisement, but we are, because the people we have doing this are people like me. They're not only people who are lawyers, but the people who are actually had been out in the field. So we go looking for everything that's wrong. And every time a client says, I met the greatest guy, he knows someone who knows someone, and they met, this guy was in the Clinton administration and he knows everyone. And then we find out it's all a fraud because the person he's connected to is a fraud. So
Right.
the words to everyone here is, if you want to be in the PPE business, and I'm not talking about 3M manufacturing PPE, okay? If you want to be in that business, if you think you're going to form a group to do it, you have to do due diligence. You have to know who you're dealing with. And I would actually say, and I know it's tough today, if you're dealing with people overseas, certainly go overseas. I have a fraud in Canada right now where people in New York didn't get on a plane and go the hour and a half to Toronto. And now we're going to be starting a lawsuit over about $500,000. So all I can caution is PPE is a huge business. There's billions of dollars there. My clients' POs start in the $5 to $10 million range and go into multiple hundreds of millions. It's highly profitable. The deals happen like that. You make the deal on Monday, it's shipped by Thursday. That's why you must do full and proper due diligence, or you're really putting yourself and your compatriots at risk. And if you're doing this as a larger company, your company at risk, and probably negligently.
So let's talk about these venues that you just mentioned, Paris and London and New York. Does that really matter to a fraudster? I mean, if you're going to sue somebody and they're from XYZ country, pick one that's someplace on the globe, which might be further afield than what we would normally do business. They take your money and they leave and you sue. So what? Right?
Well, I think the difference is, who is the fraudster? There are fraudsters who have a lot of money and have companies that you can go after. The reason why I'm saying going to one of the 3 trade law capitals is because they have judges and case law that understand this. And you can go in and perhaps get a judgment and try to go after that company. And honestly, a lot of people from Asia have some connection to the US, for example, or to Europe. I found both. So you have a potential connection there, attenuated though it may be. If you try to sue a Vietnamese company in Vietnam, and you're an American company, how hard is it to sue a Californian in California if you're from New York? At that point, you can do it. I'm not saying it can't work. I'm not saying you can go to the International Court of Trade possibly, but I would rather have a judgment in hand and hoping that it's a country we have comity with where they will enforce the judgment or try to enforce it for us than have to go into a court which does not have a body of law that I think would be supportive of an outside company.
Right. What about, counterfeits? I mean, how are you sure that, the material that you're buying, the product that you're buying actually, it meets specifications, to provide that protection? How do we?
The first and foremost important step in any of these transactions is, once the goods are accumulated, is having SGS or one of the other major inspection services go and certify what is there. And hopefully you have it done as goods are being loaded on the truck, so you don't have the idea of bait and switch. It also helps you with, Joe, you mentioned goods being purchased by me and then being diverted to someone else. Well, it also helps you if you could watch the loading. Many, I won't say many, but more and more companies are using their freight forwarders to inspect goods at factory level. So if they have people on site in Thailand, they'll pay to have that done. In addition, and see the production, or pay someone like Zonatech to go and verify the production and the quality, while it is being made. But the SGS certificate is the key document, as important as a letter of credit or a sale and purchase agreement. It keys off the entirety of the transaction.
Right. Now, how do these people get conned so easily? I mean, you had made mention about professional-looking websites. Probably more professional than the people that actually, bona fide, suppliers of these materials. So how does the average schmo on the street, even the above-average schmo, how does that person know that whoever they're dealing with is real? I mean, some of these people have, really good websites. That would, pass muster from the, casual observer. And of course, there's a lot of babes in the woods that are getting into this business. As you said, there's, people are panning for those gold nuggets. That greed factor is, sometimes very seductive. How does a person know that they're in a hazardous, situation, and how they avoid it?
I'm sorry. If it sounds too good, it is.
Yeah, it's as simple as that.
Really the truth. If the company hasn't been, if a company is a real estate company, and all of a sudden they tell you they're a trade company, and the company is small, and they can tell you that they can fund $100 million, you question, where's the money coming from? How are they doing it? If someone claims they have a connection to the president of wherever, you do your best by trying to track the person. However, I can tell you, I had one where an eminent physician was involved in obtaining goods, had lawyers, had everything, and at the end of the deal was fraud. So there's no 100% way, but that's why I said, don't run ahead of yourself and say, it sounds great. Look, they're going to land at Kennedy Airport and we're going to have 10 million. From that, I'm going to make 2 million. Or I had a deal which was for 460 million, and 4 people were going to make 7, 12, close to $13 million. It would all be in a week. The world doesn't work that way, and yeah. It's no different than telling you, I'll sell you the Brooklyn Bridge. You can put toll on it. You'll make a fortune. Be wary, don't take everything as gospel. And I'm not saying there are not a lot of good people. Okay, there are. I deal with some really, really good people who I've come to like as friends besides clients. I'm very protective of them, and I'm sort of giving you the advice I give them, is that if someone tells you it's black, make sure it is. If someone's telling you it's white, make sure it is. And if something doesn't add up, even something small, stop and figure out why and ask questions. And don't accept questions like, I'll give you another deal. We were doing a deal and there was a guy both in Hong Kong and in Europe, and he was known as the chairman. And we kept being told, the chairman will decide the allocation. The chairman will decide this. Well, the chairman is sitting in Connecticut and has no goods at all. But they set up the whole thing. And we were able to sniff that out. But what started is when my client kept telling me the chairman, I said, chairman of what? And I tried to find a company anywhere near the name that it said it was. And I finally found one. They don't have a chairman, they have a managing director. So I know that sounds funny, but those little things, like any deal, that's what you do. You look for the thing that doesn't add up. And sometimes something small turns into something big, and sometimes it turns into nothing. But again, I have clients who bring in shipments. I have one that's going to bring in air shipments weekly starting on November 1st. So there are real deals here, but be careful.
Yeah, I'll share with you. I mean, it's not just PPE where people can be defrauded. I have a friend who had shared with everybody on Facebook that he had bought his dream car. It was a Ferrari Spider, and he was getting it for $35,000 or whatever it was. And I was looking it up and on the internet, and they're $125,000 to $200,000 vehicles, and it sounded like a deal too good to be true, right? So a couple of weeks go by, and he calls me in a panic, and he says, "Listen, I think I've been scammed. I sent my money over, and now I can't get in touch with the people that sold me the car." And he gave me their website, and they seemed legit. They're based in Germany. But then I saw another corporate headquarters in Croatia. And all of a sudden, red light, sirens started going off, and red flags going off as soon as I saw Croatia. And I said, "Where did you send your money to?" He sent it to Croatia. Okay, and that money was gone. It was gone. And I was like, "Dude, why didn't you, for the price of a plane ticket, go and pick up the car?" I mean, it would cost you $1,000. You would have actually been able to open it up on the German Autobahn on the way to Rotterdam for a Ro-Ro. And the Ro-Ro ended up, and that was the end of his money. And, once that money leaves, it's really, really difficult. And of course, as soon as the money hit, the bank account was drained and closed, right? And poof, I mean, that was gone. So, there's hazards. If you're not seasoned in handling and doing these kinds of transactions, the opportunity to lose a ton of money really quick is there. I mean, it's there, and I would really, really strongly suggest that you cross your T's, dot your I's, have somebody go out there and inspect it, make sure it gets on the right container, that container's sealed, and before the money starts flowing, make sure that you're protected.
Right. And if you're seller, I'm sorry, go
what's
ahead.
that? No, you go on.
Well, if you're a seller, know who you're selling to, or a broker. Right. That's another thing. For example, if you're selling to a U.S. state, states have purchasing requirements, and the purchasing agent might want to take anything. But that doesn't mean if the deal goes bad, you will have run afoul of those requirements. And saying, "I didn't know, he didn't tell me," is not going. And the first case I gave you with a state where the people are in trouble is, there's real questions of whether or not the price they charged was legal to charge a state, even though it was market for a non-government entity. And right. Again, it's like anything else. If you're in a business, learn your business. You may not right. need a lawyer, you may not need a consultant, but know your business. Right. If you are building condominiums in Texas, that doesn't tell you how to do a deal with Taiwan. Right. So right. Either learn, read, do, and don't rush yourself. PPE is not going away in the near future. So right. Spend some time, learn, meet, do due diligence. If you need professionals, get them. Talk to people who actually do it, and start small. And right. then it could work. The supply chain issues, quite frankly, everyone that I know is using freight forwarders. The freight forwarders know how to move this stuff. If you rely on them, be careful, as with anything, as who's the importer of record. Be careful with customs, who's clearing it. Be careful with the stuff you would in any trade deal, but just be right. extra careful about who you're doing business with.
Right, especially right now, since there's so many people perpetrating a fraud. I think it would be wise also to check your greed. You know what I mean? It's like I think that promise of riches beyond imagination immediately for little risk. I think anybody that ticks those boxes is in great peril. And I think that it would be advantageous for people to, check that greed, give it a sniff test. I mean, does this pass even, the most remote semblance of authenticity before they start sending money away?
Right. Again, I don't want to be like the boy who cried wolf, or the adult who cried wolf, I guess now. I understand entrepreneurial spirit. I'm in the service industry. I certainly do, as is Joe. But again, I think Joe said it best. Well, I'm going to change that. I'm going to paraphrase. In the movie Wall Street, Kirk Douglas says, "Greed is good." Greed isn't good when it puts you into something that's bad.
Right. Right. Absolutely correct.
And
And by the way, I was looking in preparation of this show. I was looking. There's a lot of good information, on the internet. From the Justice Department, they have a justice.gov coronavirus/combating fraud was a great webpage to go to, and the FTC consumer.ftc.gov. There's a blog on 2020/08. Scammy PPE sellers exploit COVID-19 fears was another great article or post, from our own federal government. So if you want to start getting some background on what perils might exist and how to negate those perils, I would check with, the government agencies that deal with this to maybe at least give the aspiring business person or tradester a leg up on some of the perils that might exist. Of course, they could also short circuit all that and just give you a call, Ron.
always take calls, Joe.
That's it.
But no, and again, and try to understand, and they're easy to find, some of the trade laws relating to the product that you're shipping in. An example, there was an exemption for KN95 masks coming from China for a very long time. Typically, they need certain certifications and limited. Some of those limits have been put back in place as masks have not been in shortage the way they were before. By the way, that's where I saw the most frauds. So just, read the trade press, the Journal of Commerce, places that talk about what's going on. And, just like if you're in the manufacturing business, you're reading the manufacturing trades, there are trades, and those will definitely help you. And various government websites, Homeland Security and such, you can always go to. Well, Joe, I'm out of things to say. How about you?
That's remarkable. I didn't think that could ever happen there, Ron. So I think that there was a lot of good wisdom shared here and a lot of good personal experiences. I hope that our audience, will benefit from the wisdom that Ron laid on them, and maybe a smattering of what I shared. And we look forward to you joining us on our next episode of Supercharged Supply Chain. Thanks for joining us.
Mr. Paris, before we go, what is the next episode?
Our next episode is going to be on VUCA, VUCA world: volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So looking forward to having you join us next time.
Thank you, everybody. Have a nice day.
Thanks. Thank you for tuning in. You've been listening to another edition of Supercharged Supply Chain with your hosts, Ron Liebman and Joseph Paris.
This presentation is for informational purposes only and is not offered as legal or professional advice regarding any particular matter. No person should act on the basis of this presentation without seeking appropriate professional advice. The speaker's views expressed in this program may not be reflective of those of anyone else, including their respective firms or any of its lawyers, associates, or clients.